Hi, my name is Keanya Booker. I am the Interim Associate Dean of the Graduate School. I'm also an Associate Professor of Teacher Education, and I'll have my colleague introduce herself.
I'm Robin, Assistant Dean in the grad school, and we are both kind of the 2 points of contact for you in the graduate school as you prepare to finish your thesis and graduate.
Yes. All right, so today what we're going to do is talk about kind of broadly what the thesis purpose is. I know you're in the throes of it right now, so you probably ask yourself that every day. We'll also spend some time talking about registering. Robin will talk about continuous enrollment credits. I'll bounce back and talk about the thesis manual and the whole ProQuest submission process. Robin will discuss graduation deadlines and other required forms that you need to make sure that you are submitting on time. And then we'll finish up talking about ways that you can talk about your thesis research to the larger campus community, and also sometimes, maybe, even win some money for doing so. As I said before, I am a member of the graduate school, as is Robin, but also a part of the dream team is Jeanette Finch, who is over in the library. She couldn't be with us today, but Ms. Finch is a wealth of information, and she's always willing to help graduate students, especially at this stage in their program, as they're trying to deal with formatting issues, sometimes trying to make sure that they have their research in order. She's very helpful with that, and she's always willing to support students. So if you ever need to reach out to her, you see her name here on the screen. All right, so I think we have 2 people so far with us, and you don't have to unmute yourself or put yourself on camera, that's fine. But if you just wanted to maybe drop in the chat which program you're affiliated with, we'd love to know who's with us today. Okay. So let's start very broadly with the thesis. And I will just say here as an aside, we have several programs in the graduate school who do have a thesis component. And not all of our programs do. Some have capstone projects, portfolios, and the like. But a thesis is really an opportunity for you as a student to really kind of put the capstone on your program of study. It is an opportunity for you to study a particular topic or area of your discipline in great depth. And in many respects, because of this undertaking, you are considered really an expert in your field in this way. And for many students, this is kind of a launching pad for doctoral work. But at the very minimum, a thesis is an opportunity for you to really establish that you have very extensive training and a very comprehensive understanding of a particular topic in your content area. Now, you might be thinking, you know, I've looked at this thesis manual, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of formatting requirements, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Why is that? Why does my manuscript have to look just like someone else's? And the reason for that is because it's a public document, meaning that once you submit to ProQuest and you go through all kind of the hoops that you have to for that process, anyone who has access to the ProQuest database, other institutions, organizations, can search and find your manuscript. And so for that reason, because it is a public document, we want to make sure there's some uniformity across all of our programs. Even though we know someone who's in English, their thesis is going to look different from someone who's in history or marine biology. We get that there will be discipline-specific kind of differences, but when it comes to formatting, we want to make sure that there's at least some level of uniformity across the board. So whether someone comes from this particular graduate program or that, if they did a thesis, it should have some degree of uniformity when we look at it in the public database. And it also, you know, once you start getting to the formatting process, you'll realize when you do your title page, people are signing off on that. So your advisors and your committee members are signing off on this, the dean of the graduate school as well, to say, yes, that this particular manuscript rises to the level of scrutiny that we have developed in the graduate school and in your program. And so in that respect, it gives you some credibility as well to your work. So again, you probably, while you're in the thick of it right now, you're scratching your head wondering, why am I doing this? Oh my goodness, this is so overwhelming. But there's a method to the madness, and there's a reason why, even no matter what discipline you come from, there is a degree of uniformity and credibility that comes with making sure that all of the theses that come from the College of Charleston have reached this particular level of scrutiny. Okay. Now, I'm going to kick it over to Robin, and she's going to talk with you about registration issues and things that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, so you know that certainly to start down the thesis path, you need to identify a thesis advisor, a faculty member who's going to shepherd you through this process, be certainly your point of contact as you feel overwhelmed and ask questions. But so yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, both of our participants here have already done that. You guys are, I think, enrolled in your first piece of your thesis. And so you've kind of already done some of these steps. You've put together a committee, you've put together a prospectus that your committee and your advisor have approved. And so all of these things are kind of required before you can even register for your thesis credits. And so this, you might already be familiar with the forms that you have to fill out, the individual enrollment form where you have to say, I'm enrolling in History 801 and I want to enroll in fall 2022. And so that is something that you as a student are responsible for generating and then circulating to your advisor and then your program director before it comes to the graduate school for processing. Now, because your thesis requirement is 6 hours, you have to enroll in another set of credits in the subsequent semesters, so History 802. So you need to know that you need to fill out that form again to register for History 802. There's no automatic process to keep you, to keep your registration going into subsequent semesters. So just know that now that registration is open for the spring, you need to start thinking about preparing a registration form for History 802. And so those forms, like all forms, are on our website under the forms page. So once you get going, once you are starting down this path of working on your thesis, you must maintain continuous enrollment. And so once you kind of max out on your History 801, 802 on your 6 hours of thesis credit, but you're not yet done, you're still working, you're still writing, you're not yet ready to defend, you need to remain continuously enrolled until you are ready to defend. And so a way to do that without registering for an actual course that requires you attend a course and complete coursework is to enroll in something we call a continuous research enrollment, which is like History 900. So that is essentially a registration placeholder. So you can register for as few as 1 hour and is up to 9 hours. Sometimes students enroll in 3 or 6 to be eligible for financial aid, but the minimum is 1. And so if you find that, you're getting into the spring semester and you're like, oh man, those defense deadlines, the deadline that my committee has requested that I submit a final draft comes up fast, you can know that you can maintain in registration by enrolling in these 900 credits. Now, if you plan to enroll, if you enroll in History 802 in the spring and you think, okay, I'm not yet ready to defend and be done by the spring, but I know I'm on track for the summer, you need to be enrolled in the summer. But if you say, okay, I know that even summer, August is not realistic, you don't have to enroll in the summer, but you must enroll in the fall. So summer is only required if you plan to graduate in the summer. Now, the flip side to that is that your faculty are not automatically on the hook in the summer. That's the time they have for themselves to do their own scholarship and their own research and travel. And so you certainly need to be courteous and conscientious that they have, they're not necessarily on contract during the summer. So if you are starting to think about your timeline and know that, spring might not be a realistic finishing point for you, have that conversation with your advisor sooner rather than later, because they are likely already making plans for what they're going to be doing that summer. And that might not, so they might not be as available to you as a committee member or as an advisor, to provide kind of the level of engagement that you might need in your final steps. And so, understand that faculty have their own obligations and kind of teaching requirements and scholarship requirements during the summer. And that means that might not automatically include, thesis oversight. So just be conscientious. And then also understand that if you're not enrolled, if you kind of fail to maintain continuous enrollment, we're watching. The graduate school is monitoring these things. And so you'll get notified that you're violating continuous enrollment policy, that you're not yet done, and we'll do some check-ins. And so just be mindful that you must maintain continuous enrollment. Grading. So another kind of fun administrative thing about the thesis is that you don't get a grade until you're done. And so in order to kind of hold hold the place of these registrations, we kind of place what is called an IP indicator, which is in progress. So that is what you will see on History 801 at the end of this semester. It just means that you're not done. So you won't get a grade until there's a defense outcome. And so until, there is an actual kind of event, until the work is done, it's a binary outcome. Did you successfully or unsuccessfully do it? It's not something that you can say, oh, I did really well in History 801, I get an A. It's kind of, and then, History 802, you might slack off a little bit and you get a B. So it's no, the grade is meant to represent the full endeavor. And so don't kind of panic when you see this IP indicator in your degree audit or on your unofficial transcript. It's really just a placeholder. But when you do finish, when you do all successfully defend, your thesis advisor will need to enter a letter grade so that you can actually graduate, because we can't award you a degree if you have these IPs sitting on your transcripts. And so that is usually kind of one of the final hurdles, is you get thumbs up from the graduate school that your thesis is accepted, but you still have these IPs on your record. So that's when it's important to, stay connected to your student email account, because we will typically send you emails saying, hey, good job, but, please reach out to your faculty to let them know they need to submit grades. And so that is usually something to kind of be cognizant of, is that, it'll feel really good to submit to ProQuest, but there's usually steps that come after that. And so grading is usually part of that.
Okay, so speaking of submitting to ProQuest, before you can actually get to that step, there are several things that we would like for you to take a look at that's posted to our website. And you see here on the screen, kind of the breadcrumbs to lead you there. So Robin and I, we undertook a pretty significant kind of action last year, where we looked at the current thesis manual and realized that we could revise it and make it a little bit more user-friendly for students, make some things a little clearer, provide some examples. So you see here on the bottom of the screen, we have examples of what the title page should look like, what the abstract should look like. Again, all this goes back to the idea that irrespective of your discipline, every single thesis that comes from the College of Charleston should have some degree of uniformity as it relates to how the formatting looks. And so because of that, I would really encourage you, before you even start trying to put chapters together or reference lists or appendices or whatever it is that your manuscript might look like, before you even start that process, definitely read through the manual. You might need to dog ear some pages, highlight some things. I would also encourage you to read through it with your advisor to make sure that you and they are also on the same page about what these different conventions look like within the formatting for the grad school. But as you can see here, it's up on the website. It's available for you to take a look at. In addition to the manual, we also have a checklist. Sometimes, you just get to the end and you need just a kind of quick and dirty overview. Are these things there? Yes, yes, yes. Do I have the right, month and year? Robin is always good about reminding folks that it can only be 1 of 3 months that you graduate, and that can be on the abstract and the title page. Things like that are in the checklist as well. So in addition to the manual, take some time to look over the checklist just to make sure that those kind of things that sometimes we overlook, that you have addressed them in your manuscript before you submit it to ProQuest. Another thing that I want to draw your attention to, and Robin will talk about this a little later on with forms more specifically, but it's very important that we know which kind of discipline that you are using and the format that you are using for your manuscripts, just so we can make sure if it's APA style, if it's Chicago style, if it's MLA, whatever you're using, we just like to have that on record so we can kind of do some double checking as well. We're not experts on these different types of formatting strategies and conventions. I am an APA person. I know that very well. I don't know MLA very well. I don't know Chicago style very well and other types of formatting, but it still is just kind of a record that we have, just to make sure that we can at least do some fact checking if we need to. Okay, and so like I said, Robin will talk more about those forms and things that you and your advisor will need to submit at a particular time.
All right, so you're on track to defend. You're ready to apply to graduate. And so you must be enrolled in order to be eligible for graduation in that term. And so that's where, the History 802 comes into play, or a continuous enrollment credit like History 900. So keep in mind that you must be registered in order to apply for graduation. And so there then are some deadlines associated with that for your final semester. So not only the graduation application deadline, but then there is a defense deadline, there's a thesis forms deadline, and there's a submission deadline. So all of those things are outlined on our website, and I'm gonna share my screen really quick. And so on our thesis resources page, there's a table here that outlines when things are due. And so there are 3 distinct deadlines for as you prepare for graduation in that semester. And so you can see, you can look ahead to spring 2023 or summer 2023 and say, okay, the submission deadline is in April. And so from that point, we've backed up other required deadlines. So your defense deadline, the last point at which you should be defending your thesis to your committee, and then the deadline to submit a handful of forms to the graduate school, the defense form, the thesis release form, and your title page. And so I just want to make sure that you're aware that this table is out there as you're preparing for spring or summer graduation, that these deadlines are already, out in the world. And so I'm gonna let you pull back up the slide deck, but so the defense form is, or the defense deadline is always going to be 2 weeks prior to the submission deadline. The submission deadline will always be the last day of class of that semester. And so you can even, go look ahead to, God, I think even the 2024 academic calendar is already out there. The last day of class, of the fall 23 semester, or even the spring 24 semester. So the submission deadline is always the last day of class, and then the other deadlines are backed up from that point. So sometimes your program might set its own deadline. You are, each program kind of has its own cadence to the semester and how they want their submission or their thesis process to run. And so the graduate school kind of has the universal deadline, but if your program wants a deadline prior to that, you should honor your program's deadline. And they also might set other deadlines. Your committee might say, we want to see a final draft by X date. And so you certainly need to build that into your timeline, because knowing that the defense deadline is out there, that the forms deadline is out there, and that the submission deadline is kind of the drop dead, no going beyond that, then that is something that, if you miss that submission deadline, that kind of, stops your graduation eligibility for that semester. That means that, the stakes are high, that you would have to enroll in a subsequent semester to keep moving through the kind of final thesis, checkout process. So the deadlines are real. I just want to communicate that the deadlines are real. So you should, treat them seriously.
Absolutely. All right, so let's say that you have managed to make all of your deadlines, everything is checked off on our end. The last step is that you need to submit to ProQuest. And this is what Robin just showed you on the website. All of the hyperlinks are there for you to take a look at. You would upload your manuscript to ProQuest. And again, this is where the thesis manual really comes into handy, and it comes in, it really helps you figure out what you need to have in terms of formatting. How are you going to do superscripts, subscripts? Are you going to italicize different words and phrases and species names in your title and in your abstract? All of that is in the thesis manual. And it really, again, helps you know, how do I format? How do I do a drop header? Am I using Roman numerals or Arabic numerals? At what point does that start? All of that's in the thesis manual. Again, most of you are going to be working out of something like Google Docs, or you're going to be working out of Microsoft Word. That's not what you would upload to ProQuest. You would make sure that it's a PDF, and that is how you would upload it to the website. Again, all of this is in the manual for you to take a look at in terms of the HTML code, like I mentioned before, superscripts and subscripts. If you're doing that in Google Docs, or you're doing that in Microsoft Word, it might look like that to you on the screen, but once you submit it to ProQuest, you need to make sure that the system is reading it properly, and that those different types of formatting changes are showing up in the PDF and also in the abstract for the system to read. Another thing that we really encourage you to make sure you do this from start to finish, always use your school issued email address. Don't use your Gmail or AOL or any other type of platform. Always make sure that when you're uploading to ProQuest that everything is done through the CFC email system. That way, when we communicate with you, it goes directly from us to that email address and we can have a record of it that way. And then another thing to think about as you are considering kind of deadlines and defense dates and walking and all of these things that happen at the end of a program, also keep in mind that once you submit to ProQuest, the very, very high likelihood that I, as the copy editor in the graduate school, will have some edits I will need you to make. Some of them are extensive, some of them are not so bad and can be kind of turned around pretty quickly. But just keep in mind that the closer you adhere to the thesis manual, the better off that process will be. It will not take as much time if you, out of the gate, make sure that you are reading that thoroughly with your advisor, you're using the checklist. It will just make the process go so much easier. You won't have to worry about kind of going back and forth with me on these little one-off things. If you read the thesis manual, even before you start drafting your manuscript, you can certainly reach out to me if you have a question about something. But I'm the person in the graduate school who has that process of editing and making sure everyone's looks the same as it goes through ProQuest. And so again, just kind of build in that time. If you're thinking about walking, if you're thinking about all these things, you don't want to make sure that you're, really kind of crunched for time at the end.
Yeah, and certainly be aware that this is done by a human. So spring is our highest volume kind of season for graduating students completing a thesis. And so you're going to hit submit and you might not get information back for 3 to 4 days on the short end. So know that you are one of many students who are submitting their thesis by the deadline, and that just be courteous that it's a human doing this. It's not automatic. And so each thesis requires a review. And so don't panic if you don't get an email, within 24 hours. Know that it's just high volume and that we're working through them.
Yes. Thank you for adding that.
So yeah. Yeah. Be mindful, be courteous of our humans doing this work. Yeah. And so even prior to submission, you must submit three forms to me, either directly to me directly or via your program. Some programs have program coordinators that like to kind of gateway, double check their forms and then submit them onto the graduate school. So either way, forms are also required to come to me prior to receiving permission to submit to ProQuest. And so one of those is the defense form. One of those is the title page, and one is the thesis release form. And so all of these are linked on the graduate school's website under the forms page. There's a little thesis section of forms. And so it's important that you use the thesis manual to build your title page, because there is an exact example, an exact replica of a title page in the thesis manual. And so it's important that you don't invent your own. They're meant to be standardized, and so that every external person that wants to review a thesis can kind of see some standardization and have a clear sense of what they're looking at. And so these are some things that are on the checklist, but there are only 3 graduation terms. Even if you defend in April or in June, your graduation term is still either May or August. So May, August, and December are the only months that can be on your title page. And the graduate dean is a member of your committee. You may not know that, but certainly not someone who is going to provide feedback or be an active participant on your committee, but is just kind of, a formality. This person should be listed on the list of signatures on your title page. And so make sure that you are including that. And so the title page also requires signatures. So during the pandemic days, we accepted kind of electronic signatures for this because a lot of students were defending virtually. And so we kind of accepted e-signatures for the title page, whereas prior to the pandemic, we wanted kind of a nice formal live signature. So now that we're a little bit post-pandemic, defenses are going back to in-person, so we will kind of accept either. So you can, bring your title page to your defense and have your committee sign there in person, Or, you can circulate something around after the fact if someone might, maybe someone's attending your defense virtually. But certainly on the title page, we don't want the Adobe signature stamp, the thing that's got the Adobe logo or the timestamp or like the IP address. Like we want the kind of scrawly electronic signature, because it's, we like the formality and tradition of kind of the nice frontispiece of your thesis to be attached to your student record. The release form is another form that you get to fill out with your advisor. And that is something that confirms your defense date. It confirms your citation style and that it's been reviewed by your committee and or advisor. And it also signifies that you have submitted a final version of your thesis to your committee and it has been accepted. So this is, a critical piece of information so that you are not submitting a draft to ProQuest. This is kind of an indication to the graduate school that you have gotten thumbs up from your committee and you're good to go for submission to the graduate school. So all of these things are important pieces that we need prior to receiving permission to submit to ProQuest. So you'll submit these and I will review them. And if there are edits needed, I'll kick it back for correction. And so you cannot submit to ProQuest until you get a thumbs up from me that your forms have been accepted. And so you need to make sure that you're cognizant of the deadlines and that you're giving yourself time, again, for a human to review and request edits prior to the submission deadline. So, lots of time management skills at work here.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay.
Yeah, and so funding. We want to give you money to help you complete this big, important thing that you're working on. So yeah, you might need to travel to archives. You might need to travel to another university to, interview a faculty member or, attend a conference. We want to help you do that work. And so the graduate school has a pot of money that can help you do this. And so we want you to ask us for that money and we want to give you this money. So if you're not already aware that we have professional development and travel grants, it's on our website. There's a little application where you provide kind of an abstract, a description of what you're working on, a small budget. I'm traveling to Columbia, South Carolina to, have access to their archives and I need, a day's worth of gas or one night in a hotel or something. Those are things that these types of grants can support. And so usually, you might not, so obviously $250 to $500 is not that much, but there are other units on campus that also offer small grants like this. And so usually you can apply to more than one source and kind of cobble together different pots of money and get pretty well covered. So that, your department, the Department of History might have its own money, the school, your academic school of humanities and social sciences usually has some travel money. So just kind of know that you cannot necessarily foot these bills yourself. We want to help support you in your research and your scholarship, and we have the funds to do that. So please ask.
Definitely. And I'll just echo what Robin said about checking with your department and your school. Virtually every department or school will certainly have some type of travel fund or professional development fund for students. And so, like she said, you might have to cobble together a few different pots of money, but it can certainly get you to where you need to go. And that's the goal. So speaking of that, in addition to your defense, where you are going to publicly talk about your work and field questions from your committee and other people who happen to be there, another opportunity, actually several opportunities to show off your work also exists through the graduate school. So this fall, we actually are having our 3MT competition. It will be Monday, November 14th. I don't know if anyone on the screen.
No, but we do have a history student participating, and so you should all come support your colleague.
Yeah, so even if you can't participate by competing, you can certainly be in the audience to support and encourage them. And so what 3MT stands for is 3-minute thesis. And basically, imagine if you were on an elevator and you had to give someone just a very kind of quick overview of your research in a very finite period of time, literally 3 minutes. And so what we want students to do is to take your thesis research and to really communicate kind of the high level parts of what you've done, but in a way that you are doing that so that the average person understands it and it's relatable, makes sense, not a lot of jargon, things like that. So like I said, we are doing that this semester. We always do that in the fall semester. We have how many students this time, Robin?
I think 10 or 11.
Oh, 11. Okay, so we have 11 students across all different disciplines who are going to be presenting their work in that competition. And like Robin mentioned before, when it comes to funding, there is money for this. So we'll have 3 winners. We'll have a first, a second place, and a People's Choice winner. The first place winner will be able to go to the regional competition where they can submit their work and they can show it to the audience there and compete with others from different institutions and colleges and universities in the Southeast. And Robin's been there. She can attest that that's always a fun opportunity to see.
And our students do very well.
Yeah.
And so we can hang with the PhD candidates from the Southeast.
That's right. Now, let's say that you missed the deadline for the 3MT competition this fall. There are 2 opportunities in the spring. One isn't on here, but the graduate research poster session is always held in the spring during Grad Ed Week, which is typically in March. And that's an opportunity for you as you're kind of putting the finishing touches on your work, looking at that manuscript for the 100th time, is to actually create a poster. And again, we can send out more information about this in the spring closer to the time about how to go about kind of the technical way of getting your poster done. But the idea again is if I just have a finite space and I have to convey the high level parts of my research, what do I pull out that's most important? And even beyond that kind of visual representation, you also have an opportunity to have people come and actually you can present for a few minutes as people kind of walk through. It's a traditional poster session. Those of you who've been to a professional conference, it's the same idea. Folks kind of just walk around from poster to poster. You might talk 5 minutes to one person, 30 seconds to another, 15 minutes to someone else. It just kind of depends on how many people participate. But it's always in person, as you can imagine, and that's in the spring semester. And that's a perfect opportunity for you, especially if you're defending later in the spring semester, to practice, to have people ask questions. So maybe you've anticipated a few on your own, but someone asks you something and that kind of conjures up, oh, that's a really good idea. I need to think about that if I'm asked that in my defense. And again, as you see here on the screen, always a little bit of money for those who participate and are awarded first place in either of our 2 different discipline categories. Robin, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, we hope that you join us for 3MT. We want to encourage people's choice, robust voting and people's choice.
Yes. Oh, and then the Research Expo. I don't think we have a date for that yet. It will be in the spring semester, and there is an opportunity for graduate students, again, to show your work, talk about your research, talk about the experience of, either conducting original research or doing archival research or analyzing a secondary data set, whatever it is that you do, that's an opportunity for you to also, again, get some really good feedback from the campus community, talk about your research with many different people from all types of audiences and backgrounds. It's always a fun time. Okay, so that's all that Robin and I wanted to talk with you about, kind of the high level pieces of this process, from forms to ProQuest submission to deadlines, committees, all of that good stuff. You see here on the screen, Robin and I are in the graduate school, and so we can be contacted. You see the email address as well as the phone number. Don't forget that you do have a library liaison. So Jeanette Finch is the person over in the library. She is the librarian for the grad students. And so she is certainly happy to help you at any time. And then also the first kind of line of defense would be your advisor. That's the person you work with very closely during this process. And then also your program director. Sometimes that's the same person. Other times it could be someone different, but those would be the 2 people that kind of when it comes to the content piece of the manuscript, certainly they would be the ones that could support you through that process. Robin and I are here for formatting things, deadlines, forms, grading issues, things like that, transcripts. But your thesis advisor and your program director would certainly be able to help you with kind of the minutia of the manuscript.
Yeah, so that's a lot of information. So it's, feel free to, we want to open it up to questions and kind of feel